Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We're Baltimore positive. We hope you set a spot for us out on your radio dial as you're driving around the Beltway. I've been listening to our competitors the last couple of weeks. We're better than they are. I swear, I listen to BAL, I listen to 105.7 the other. I was trying to find 1300 had some awful thing on Sunday night instead of the Washington Commanders game. But it is a divisional week. The NFL people and the Jim Nances of the world would say this is the best matchups of the year this weekend. So we'll have that on Saturday, sitting around watching Kansas City play Houston, figuring out who we're going to face if we win. Obviously, everybody's a Houston fan, the way they were a Denver fan on Sunday around here. Meanwhile, Philadelphia and Washington could be playing against each other in the NFC Championship game next weekend. And the Baltimore Ravens could host the AFC Championship game next week if Houston were to win Saturday and the Ravens were to win Sunday. Luke Jones is here, shuffling off to Buffalo we are this weekend, where I'm sure it'll be balmy at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday night. Great football game. It is the game everybody in the country is going to be talking about this week. They already were. Ravens have been instilled disrespectfully a 1-point dog on the road up in Western New York. No snow in the forecast, a little bit of light dusting on Sunday from what I understand, but not during the game. There's no threat. But it's Buffalo. There's always a threat, right, Luke?
Oh, no question. I mean, it's Western New York. Anyone who's spent any time in Western New York, Central New York this time of year, you
Tell
know
them
that.
about your background in Western New York. Come on, tell them. Kids
Well,
don't know your story about Syracuse.
well,
They don't.
Syracuse is Central New York. I mean, that's yeah.
But the
Syracuse.
picks up the water and it dumps it on
Oh,
Syracuse
the
and
lake effect.
Watertown.
Yeah. I mean, like if you live in that part of the country, I mean, you're kind of amused when you talk. And I say this as though I lived there for years. I spent 2 years at Syracuse. Let's be clear. I'm not
Which
like
where you got all you soaked in all of that Bob Costas, right?
yeah,
Which made you the
sure,
man you
yeah,
are,
yeah.
right? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But no, you if when you live there, you're amused when you hear other areas like home where we talk about a dusting or an inch of snow as though it's an event, right? I mean, not that it's shutting things down because we're not living in the South where they never get snow, and when they get an inch of snow, they're paralyzed. But we still view it as something that is a thing. But when you live in that part of the country, you know, you you wake up and there's a fresh 1 inch of snow on the ground, you shrug your shoulders, right? I mean, everyone has four-wheel drive. You that part of the country. I mean, you see people driving around. Everyone has plows, on their
This is what
trucks.
makes my
I mean,
wife a
it's
lot more hardy than me. She grew up in New Hampshire.
yeah,
Like the
yeah.
snow
So
thing. Like she came home from Florida to snow Sunday night. No, yeah, snow's just snow. Get the dust out, you clean it off.
yeah,
To me, it's like I let the 5 inches of snow sit on the car for 2 days because I didn't want to touch it. Because I just don't. You know what I mean? I'm
no,
like, I
I
had a
got you.
carport for 20 years. I'm bougie now. I just am. Since I live downtown, I'm bougie.
Oh, and I will say this for my time in Central New York, which was a long time ago at this point in time, I have definitely gotten to the point now where it's like the cold bothers me
Every
way
time I
more,
talk to you
way
about
more than it
Syracuse,
used
all
to.
you're like, it's cold. It was cold. It was cold. It's going to be cold at the football game on Sunday night. I don't think there's any
Sure.
doubt about that. Um, for you with this matchup, this was inevitable, right?
I mean, I think when you look at the landscape of the AFC, I mean, Kansas City, we knew was going to be the number one seed from, I don't know, I mean, early November on. And I know Buffalo had half a puncher's chance to catch them, and they had the head to head in case they had caught them. But, you knew Kansas City was going to be there. And you look at the rest of the AFC, and it's Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and their teams. And as I mentioned in our previous segment, every time the Ravens have had a healthy Lamar this time of year, they've been in the divisional round, other than his rookie year, which again, I don't really count in the same way that I talk about 2019 on. They've been there. The Bills are there in the divisional round every year. They're not getting to the conference championship every single year, and Cincinnati's been in that mix in some years recently.
And will be
But
again, by the way. We're going to have a problem with them in January before we have a Pittsburgh problem. And this
oh
year, I'm
yeah,
shocked that it wasn't a Cincinnati problem because we talked about it in the offseason as though Cincinnati, because
I mean
dude,
they've
this
got
is
to
the
figure out
time of
their
the year when you have to
defense.
have a quarterback. There's 8 teams left in the tournament, right? They all have quarterbacks.
Sure. I mean, they have to figure out their defense because their defense killed them this year. I mean, Joe Burrow. If the Bengals were in the tournament, I and I'm not talking about their chances of winning in the tournament, but if they were in the tournament, you'd be hearing way more about Joe Burrow with Lamar and Josh Allen in terms of the MVP discussion. I mean, go look at the All Pro voting. Joe Burrow got some love from the All Pro voters as well. So, but their team wasn't as good enough. Wasn't as good. They weren't good enough. Their defense was awful. They wasted an amazing year from Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. But to get back to your original question, I mean, I think we all were anticipating this. I mean, yeah, you have Cinderellas, and you could have talked me into the idea of Denver having a half a chance of upsetting Buffalo. Hey, they scored a touchdown early in that game, right? They take the deep shot, but they had a rookie at quarterback. I mean, Houston. CJ Stroud, I give him credit. He played better in the second half against the Chargers on Saturday, but this has not been a good year for CJ Stroud. This his sophomore year compared to what he did as a rookie has been underwhelming. Now, it's not all his fault. I mean, their offensive line's not very good. They had injuries at wide receiver, but all those other quarterbacks, you're coming up with a reason to try to rationalize them getting to the divisional round. Whereas Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, it's kind of the default expectation, right? Assuming nothing crazy happens to their quarterbacks. And the Ravens have been in that spot where Lamar's been hurt in 21 and 22, and they weren't there then as a result, of course.
It's kind of like Borg, McEnroe, and Connors. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
I mean,
there's three powerhouses.
They're going to be there, right? I mean, they're going to be there in the semis.
Only one of them's getting through the tournament here, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, and that's where, for me, and this is not to say that the Ravens don't have high expectations in the divisional round, because they do, and they should, right? I mean, you can make the argument whether you're looking at DVOA or this metric or that metric that they could be the best team. I mean, they could be. Record-wise, they're not, but talent level-wise, you could certainly make an argument for them. But that's the thing. You can't have, this isn't like the WWE where you could have a triple threat match for the title. Only two teams are going to play in the AFC title game, and Kansas City's got the easier draw against Houston. They earned that, so there's no complaining there. But when you're the Bills and you're the Ravens, you're saying, man, we've had a great season. Our quarterback has been an MVP. We have Pro Bowl players. We have a good record. All the different things you can talk about this time of year, but only one's going to move on, and that's where, you made a comment about if the Ravens were to lose Sunday, then what would the offseason feel like? It'd be frustrating, but I don't think it's like, oh, you need to fire this guy or you need to make this change or that. Then it's just like, well, Buffalo was a little bit better than you. And same for the Bills. If the Ravens advance, assuming it's not like a controversial game or a blowout, or there's this dumb coaching decision, or, just assuming it's two great teams going at it and one wins and one loses. The frustrating part of it is, I don't know there's a whole lot to say other than, well, you got to regroup and come back next year. I mean, it's really that simple. Now, the difference is, if you're the Ravens, if you had lost to the Steelers, then that's a different discussion. If the Bills had lost to the Broncos on Sunday, then that's a different discussion, because then you're losing to an inferior team. So, that's why I said, I mean, for the Ravens, for the Bills, for the Chiefs, Chiefs put aside because they've won. They've won multiple times, so they should be viewed differently in that way. But if you're the Ravens and you're the Bills, the default is you get to the divisional round, and then it's like, all right, here we go. This is when the season really starts. This is
you've
where,
been saying that for 50 weeks. Literally.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, this always felt, depending on how the draw was going to look, it always felt inevitable. And from a narrative standpoint, if you're trying to write the Lamar Jackson era Ravens finally breaking through and getting to the Super Bowl, yeah, you were going to have to go through Josh Allen and obviously Patrick Mahomes, and throw the Steelers into the wild card round for good measure, right? I mean, even though they've been way more mediocre overall, the Ravens have had their issues against the Steelers over the last 5 years. So it sets up in a way that feels, it feels right.
Well, the game's in Buffalo because you lost to the Steelers. The game's in Buffalo because you lost to the Browns. The game's in Buffalo because you lost to the Raiders. Sure. Because you beat the snot out of the Bills.
Yeah.
All you had to do was tie them in the standings, and the game would have been in Baltimore. But You couldn't. And they took care of their business against the Patriots and the Jets and, in their own division, and the Ravens didn't do that.
Yeah, well, and I would say, and you just mentioned the division, they did have the benefit of playing in a division that wasn't as good as the AFC North. I mean, even, I mean, Pittsburgh was a playoff team. Cincinnati could have been. I think everyone looked at Cincinnati's true talent level with their offense at the very least and understood they're a handful to play. Whether you beat them or not, like the Ravens beat them twice, but both those games easily could have been losses if the ball bounces a different way or something happens a little bit differently than it did. But it is what it is. And at this point, I mean, Vegas has the Ravens as a 1 point dog. I mean, that's I'm not shocked by that, considering the home field, considering what the Bills have been, considering what the Ravens have been. I mean, I think week 4 shouldn't we shouldn't put too much stock into it in terms of like thinking the Ravens are going to blow them out, but it should give the Ravens and the fan base every bit of confidence that the Ravens can go up there and win. I mean, there's no reason to think they can. But it's two good teams, two great quarterbacks, right? Two teams that have some imperfections here and there, but nothing, so out of the ordinary like the Bengals with their lousy defense. I mean, I think the Bills, a lot was made about their defense in how it looked really a few weeks back. They had that shootout against the Lions. And let me be clear. I don't think the Bills have a great defense by any stretch of the imagination. And man, if they don't stop the run a little bit better, at least a little bit better than they did in week 4, then the Ravens absolutely will win.
Well, they got
But
Milano back. They
yeah,
are better than they were, and the Ravens defense is better than it was in week 4 too.
well, and I think what this is really going to come down to, and I already said this, but I'll reiterate this point. I don't think this is going to be 41-38. I don't think it's going to be crazy, like a crazy shootout. But I do think this is the kind of game when you look at these two offenses and their ability to run the football. I think the best defense for both teams is going to be their offense, trying to maintain possession of the ball, scoring touchdowns inside the red zone, running the ball, trying to wear down the opposition. And I think it's going to be a matter of who does that better and who makes fewer mistakes in the process of trying to do that, meaning not turning the ball over, not committing penalties and putting yourself in first and 15 or second and 12 or things like that. So I think that's where this comes down to two great teams who does the little things better. I mean, I think that's going to be a big part of this because I think both quarterbacks are going to make plays. Both teams have Derrick Henry's unbelievable, but don't sell James Cook short. Don't sell Ty Johnson short. I mean, the Bills have they've got some playmakers in the backfield themselves. So, I don't expect the Bill. I'm not sitting here saying the Bills are going to run for 200 yards against the Ravens, but I think they can make enough plays with their running backs out of the backfield to keep the Ravens defense honest in a way that maybe certainly they didn't do in week 4, when the Ravens really got up early and got after them and made the Bills more one dimensional. So, I think this is the kind of game where both offenses are going to look at this and say, yes, we need to score points and we need to score touchdowns and not kick field goals, but we also want to try to do this in a way to keep the other team's offense off the field. The best defense against Lamar is your offense maintaining possession and controlling the clock and moving the ball and obviously scoring points, but you try to limit possessions in that way. So I think that's where this game's going to be really, really interesting because both offenses love to run the football. I think Zay Flowers' status is going to be huge. We haven't mentioned it to this point, but we're going to see whether he can play this week. All along the thought was he has a chance to play this week. I don't think it's fait accompli one way or the other. I think a lot of it's just going to depend on how his knee's feeling. Whereas the thought even early last week, all along, was that Flowers wasn't going to play against Pittsburgh. That was the sense I got, and they ended up ruling him out. Right? I mean, the Ravens don't do that unless a guy's not even close to playing on game day. So that's a big factor. At the same time, you have a Bills offense that Shakir has come a long way. He's a yak guy. I mean, certainly someone you have to be aware of. They have Amari Cooper. They've got some other guys who can make some plays here and there, but there's no Stephon Diggs. There's no stud wide receiver like Jamar Chase for Cincinnati, of course.
Or even Pickens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think from that standpoint, and if the Ravens don't have Zay Flowers, they're kind of in a similar spot. They have guys who can make plays still, have receivers and tight ends who can still do some things. Bateman and Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and we saw that against Pittsburgh.
Well, they
But
can win out of that 12 personnel and the
yeah,
two tight ends, and Justice Hill played a role in that in his back end. So, I mean, I'm not, for me, the game, and you said a couple of things. You're like, don't kick field goals, right? Like, got to
you got to
score
score
touchdowns.
touchdowns.
Bad weather night, we know it's going to be that. Whatever it's going to be 20 degrees, right? So,
Yeah.
like, whether there's precipitation or whatever, we know it's going to be breath under freezing, cold night, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see
I,
about the wind.
the notion for me of what happens on third down and fourth down, and look, when Derrick Henry's running the ball and they're in 2nd and 1 and 2nd and 2, as I wrote early in the game when they were running and Lamar was running, when they're in 2nd and 2, you're not going to beat them. I mean, you're not, because they're a 4-down offense in that way. They move forward mainly. They're not Barry Sanders. When they move backwards, it's because their offensive line jumps. It's because of
Mhm.
penalties that they move backwards. They don't move backwards because Derrick Henry getting trapped other than a safety in the backfield, right? So for me, key decisions, and this is where, and McDermott and Harbaugh have a long, history and all that. The notion that it's 3rd and 4 on the 42, the other 42, 59-yard field goal, can't do it. Don't really want to punt. Now it's 3rd and 4, you get 2. Now it's 4th and 2 and you're at the 39 or the 40. 57-yard field goal in Buffalo, giving them the ball at the 50 if you miss it, right? What are you doing? Well, they're going for it. I mean, they're going to go for it every single time, and the Bills are too.
Mhm.
And I'm going to tell you, man, that's when this is going to get slobber knockery. There's going to be 3 or 4 of those in this game because I've seen these offenses. They're going to zigzag, stutter, penalty, 1st and 25, no problem. We're going to make it. They're going to do all of that, and there's going to be those nut cut 4th and 1 from the 28. What do you do? 4th and 3 from the 31. What are you going to do? Because that's going to happen. And that's going to be decisions of Harbaugh, decisions of McDermott, the kicking game in general, and the ideology of I can get 6 feet here and we're going to be go playing Kansas City next week, especially when you get to the end of the game, giving up possession of the ball. You don't want to kick a field goal, so you don't want to give the ball back. You're like, I like our chances to keep the ball for another 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes here in a 26-24 game, 27-27 game. I mean, to me, shootouts relative. There's going to be points, but to me, this game is about those moments, 3rd and something,
Mhm.
and where you get, and then how that either becomes a 1st down or 4th down. And once it's 4th down, to me, it's cannonball run here because like they're not going to kick field goals. They're not. If it's 4th and 4 from the 26, you kick a 43-yard field goal, or are you gonna keep the ball? I don't know. I think almost every time these teams are going to go for it on 4th down, and I think that's one of the reasons the kicking thing's going to be weird. The weather's going to be weird. Just the fact that you don't want Justin Tucker to end your season at this point, missing doinking. We saw some doinks over the weekend, some successful, some otherwise. But um, I just wanted to say that out loud early in the week because I think that's the game to me. 7.5 minutes left to go, 1-score game on the road. Doesn't matter who has the ball, us or them. Driving over the 50, decision making, play calling, and possession of the ball and finding the sticks.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at third down, you look at red zone. I mean, fourth down certainly. You mentioned the kicking element. While Justin Tucker has looked way better since the bye week, there haven't exactly been a ton of high leverage moments there, right? I mean, he's made every kick. I mean, that's great. That's what you want. I mean, there's no. It's always funny when people try to deem someone being back or someone being fixed. I mean, there's no silver bullet in determining that. It's
Well, the
just
Ravens never
do they
thought he was
make
broken until he missed the kicks at 4 o'clock on Sunday because out on the backfield, he can still kick
right.
the ball 65 yards.
Exactly, and that's why you haven't seen me breathlessly giving updates in pregame warmups. So Justin Tucker made it from 60. It's like, okay, that doesn't mean anything to me, right? I mean, and it's fine. Like, I'm not being disparaging to people who do, but it's all within the context of what's happening when the lights are on and the pressure's on and that situation
I
matters.
would
And
also say this for you and me because I scour the internet too. The stuff that you and I know is important, we focus on. The fans are focused on who said
Well,
what and this and that. People think I'm focused on the fans in the stands and the tickets. I am, because of the franchise and because of where it used to be and where it is. And you have said it's not the same. Most people are like, it's not the same without Ray Lewis. They brought Ray Lewis back to dance. That's all sports radio talk.
right.
But what's really important in the framework of the game and what they're doing, that all happens within the game, because they're prepared out Knowings Mills. If they didn't think Justin Tucker was the best kicker they could have, they wouldn't have him. I was never a guy that they should work out on. I mean, you and I had some dark days here back in November. Like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? He hasn't had to make a kick in 6 weeks, really, in the kind of conditions he's going to have to make it in. As we saw the Washington kid, their sixth kicker this year. You talk about the Ravens and stability. They've had three kickers ever, right? Now, four or five, you put Hauschka and
Right,
Graham
right.
Gano in there, but like literally, they went through six kickers in 20 weeks, and they're trying to win again this week in Detroit with this. I I'll take my chances with Justin Tucker, but my point is, when it's 4th and 1 on the 17-yard
You're
line,
going for it.
you're going for it.
Yeah,
So,
and both
so, so,
both
so
teams are.
that's it,
Yeah,
right? I guess that was my greater point.
right. Well, and we haven't mentioned this, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but Tyler Bass missed a big kick against Kansas City in the playoffs last year, right? So there's scar tissue for him as well, especially on this
Scott
stage
Norwood.
now.
I'm sorry. Did I say
Yeah,
that this week?
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to be. I
Scott
don't mean
Norwood
this
and
week.
not Steve Christie,
As I
right?
sit here wearing an Oilers jersey against the Bills.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think you look at red zone. Ravens were first in the league in red zone offense. Buffalo was third. Third down offense. Ravens were second in the league. Buffalo was seventh. And you just said it. I mean, for either one of these teams, obviously the Ravens, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, we've seen them use their version of the tush push with Mark Andrews. You have Derrick Henry. You have Lamar Jackson. Buffalo, James Cook, Josh Allen runs plenty of quarterback sneaks. So you get into 3rd and short, 4th and short. Neither one of these teams want to be, meaning their defense wants to be in 3rd and short, 4th and short against this opposing offense, because the chances are they're gonna pick it up. So I think this is the kind of game again where possession of the football is going to be so important, and I think converting third down, converting inside the red zone is just going to be. I mean, it's yeah, and let me be clear, this isn't rocket science that I'm expressing here. These are always important factors, but in a game like this, I think it's going to be so much more important than normal.
Well, you
Just
feel the
because of
oxygen change. You felt
yeah,
that Saturday night with the lights on here and all that. The oxygen changes, and it gets a little thinner this week to get air for everybody, because the stakes, and especially your last game, you're sitting around, nut cut time, watching all this football Saturday, watching on Sunday.
sure,
And the other part that I keep going back to, and I'll continue to reiterate this, because the Denver game, everybody was a Denver Bronco fan for a couple hours at 1 o'clock on Sunday around here, trying to get a home game. The notion that we're all going to be rooting for I'm wearing my Houston Oilers jersey. I'll be wearing my Houston Texans jersey on Saturday afternoon when they take on the Chiefs. I mean, you don't want to go to Kansas City. So the
no,
notion that you could be sitting waiting for a home game too, that's a whole different level of how you play it on Sunday and how you think about it when you go to bed Saturday, because there is that possibility. 8.5 points, I'll hear it.
yeah.
You have to make your own case to think that CJ Stroud's going to go into Kansas City and win. But Kansas City has been vulnerable this year. They have been.
Yeah, Ben. I mean, I'm certainly not holding my breath on that scenario. And I'm not suggesting anyone else
Is
would
this
be
where I
either.
announce that you and I have
But
flights to Kansas City next weekend held already?
sure, yeah, no
I'll
question.
just
Go
say
ahead.
that. So
But
we're
I
going to
think
Kansas City if the Ravens are going. I'm not going to the press box, but I'm not going to the door and take some pictures. How
but
about
there's
that?
but there's also there's even the element, assuming the Chiefs do win, and I fully expect the Chiefs to win on Saturday because they're the better team, and I'm not a big believer in the Houston Texans. 31-2 on Christmas will do that to you, right? Well, when we saw the Ravens just absolutely embarrass them in Houston. But I think there's also that element that if the Chiefs do win, both of these teams, Buffalo and the Ravens, Buffalo 3 times, the Ravens last year in the AFC title game in Baltimore. Buffalo lost to Kansas City in Buffalo in the divisional round last year. There's also that element of knowing that you win this game, you get another shot at Mahomes, you get another shot at Andy Reid, you get another shot at the Chiefs. So, I mean, this is the way that this was always the way it was going to to line up, right? I mean, if you're talking about, again, laying it out in a narrative form where you're writing the book or you're putting together the NFL films highlight video, right? I mean, this is always the way it's going to work for any of these teams, right? Kansas City is the number one seed. They deserve that, right? They went 15-1 until week 18 and rested their starters. And you have Buffalo and the Ravens that have been chasing them for years now. And they both have come up short against them in January. And they're both looking for their redemption. They're both looking for their opportunity to finally break through. To your point, you have a Bills fan base that's been waiting 4 decades for this. You have a Ravens fan base that has seen the Lamar era Ravens be so great in the regular season and be number one seed and home field and all of that and come up short. So both these teams are dying to break through. And the winner most likely goes to Kansas City and then has that another shot at the Chiefs. So it's great. I mean, this is what we talk about all year long, all off season, all spring, all summer, all regular season. We keep coming back to, well, they have to be better for this come January. The first 11 weeks of the season, we kept talking about the defense has to be better, has to at least be average. It can't be this lousy pass defense. Well, they've done that and they've been better than average. I mean, the Ravens have had one of the best defenses in the league over the last 7 weeks. So, and they're going to need it. They're going to need to, I'm not expecting them to shut out the Bills or hold them to 10 points like they did back in week 4, but you're going to need to get a stop here or there, right? In the same way that the Bills defense is saying, God, we can't let Derrick Henry run for 200 yards on us again. If he runs for a buck 20, all right, like we can probably still find a way to win under that circumstance. But if he's running for 200 on us and Lamar's running for 70, man, Josh Allen's probably going to be standing on the sideline all night, right? So both these teams are trying to figure out ways to steal a possession here or there. That's where not just talking about fourth down scenarios, special teams will be so important in this game. And we know that the Ravens haven't been stellar in that way. Now, a big part of, when you look at DVOA or things like that, in judging their special teams, Justin Tucker's early season struggles really dock them big time when you're looking at it through that lens. But, this is a Buffalo team that has not been very good special teams wise either. So
I didn't think about that, but missing the kicks is one of the reasons they're in Buffalo this week, right? Literally.
Sure. Yeah, no question. So, missing kicks, penalties, giving up big plays in the passing game as the Ravens did over the first 11 weeks of the season. The Bills having issues stopping the run at times, although I've seen some people, kind of overstate their issues with their run defense. I don't think the run defense has been quite as bad as some people have made it out to be.
Well, I think we go back to the fact that you beat them by 4 touchdowns. There is a point where there's a little bit of a track record there, although it was a long time ago. We talked about Matt Milano and the differences and all of that. But that's going to get brought up all week, that the Ravens beat the snot out of this team and they're a 1-point dog this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure it's not lost on them. Again,
Vegas expects them to be going home Sunday night. That's crazy.
I mean, they do, but only because someone has to, right? I mean, it's not like they're disrespect would be the Bills being a 5-point favorite.
They wouldn't be. Disrespect that doesn't exist in gambling because, like, the gamblers set the, people that bet on it. I have a feeling the Ravens will be favored by the time they get up there. I mean, I just could be because I think people are going to bet on the Ravens. They're not going to bet on the Bills. That's my gut.
They could be, although there are a lot of people in Bills Mafia, so you never know. I mean, but
there's also a lot of people that think Lamar Jackson's not going to win a big game too, because that's gone on forever. And
both these guys have to win a big game. I mean, Josh Allen through the same lens. Josh Allen
lost at home
last Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So I mean,
they both lost at home last year. How about that?
We talked about this back in week 4. I mean, these two teams are kindred spirits in a lot of ways. I mean, both have all-world quarterbacks. Both have been the bridesmaid how many times in the AFC now, where they've just come up short against Patrick Mahomes, or this has happened or that has happened. I mean, obviously the Ravens historically have a couple Super Bowl titles under their belt, whereas the Bills had the 4 AFC titles in the 90s and couldn't win. But you have two teams that have just been chasing Mahomes and the Chiefs, and both teams desperately want another crack at it, next week. But it's going to be, who's going to survive here? Who's going to win? Vegas has loved the Ravens all year, right? I mean, we talked about it last week. You were talking about the fact that you were surprised that the Steelers were a 9.5 point underdog. Well, probably should have been more because the Steelers stink, right? I mean, again, how bad they were, but the fact that the Ravens were that big of a favorite, the fact that the Bills were, what was it? It ended up being 7.5, 8 points over the Broncos, as far as the point spread. So, these are two teams that Vegas has liked all year. When you look at the Super Bowl odds right now, I mean, they're right up there. So someone's going to win, but someone's going to lose as well. And that's where again, to me, the conversation was going to be a tough one if you lost to the Steelers. If you laid an egg against Pittsburgh on Saturday night, and we're talking about the Ravens being eliminated to that team, we're having a way different discussion now. We're talking about John Harbaugh. We're talking about elements, other coaching elements, other elements of this roster. We're talking about what has to happen here that you're so great in the regular season and it doesn't translate. If you lose to the Bills on Sunday, it's frustrating as all heck. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's this damning indictment on the Ravens, right? I mean, it's the 2 seed against the 3 seed. I mean,
Well, it depends on how they look too. I
well,
mean,
yeah,
I think to
and
some
that's what
degree.
right.
I mean, last year we're
I
still
mean, if
going
you
to
get
talk about
blown
them
out,
not
that's a
running the
different
football.
story. Yeah, I mean,
But they're
if
getting
the
off the
Ravens,
bus with Derrick Henry on Sunday. I have to like them wearing a Derrick Henry jersey and talking about this for a couple of years. To me, he is the difference maker, and I can't fathom if they were getting off the bus Saturday night with J.K. Pick any running back. Pick Josh Jacobs, whom I love, who's eliminated now. Chad, who was a beast the other night in Philadelphia, but like he's just a guy. No offense, he's not Jim Brown, which is why I bought the jersey, which is why I talk about it in that way because it is like the scene in Fast Times at Ridgemont High when he gets going, and the Bills better figure it out on a cold night. And as Lamar pointed out the other day, yeah, he doesn't like the cold weather, but the defenders don't like to tackle in it either. And Lamar thinks about it that way.
well, I think all these players do. I mean, look, it's cold for everyone, but you got to go play. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to be thinking about the cold weather. When you think about the cold weather, when you're down 13 points in the second half, that's when you think about the
Good
cold
point.
weather. And I think
It's
you
always
saw
colder when you're losing.
now, I mean, Pittsburgh's defense stunk from Jump Street on Saturday night, but you certainly saw as that game went on, their interest level in tackling Derrick Henry, which wasn't very high to begin with, went to zero as the game went on. So, that said a lot about, that said so much about what was under the hood for the Steelers compared to the Ravens, which was jarring. I think, for a lot of people seeing Pittsburgh, but maybe not because that's how Pittsburgh's played in the postseason for a long
Boy,
time.
is
But
sleepwalking part of the first. How do you come into Baltimore, have the lights go on like that? You come down and sleepwalk through the first. I mean, that
yeah, I
Tom
mean,
Tomlin's going to have to answer to something, and there was rumors about him getting traded somewhere. I don't know where they're trading him, but where he'd want to go or him picking his spot or whatever. At this point, I mean, I know him pretty well. I don't think he ever thought or wants to coach anywhere else. I don't think he has that where John has thought about it and wouldn't I look good in Green Bay and some of these Notre Dame. John thought, like there's some thoughts about that.
yeah.
I mean, John never really wanted to be an NFL head coach to begin with. John's passion was college football, but John thought he was going to be Notre Dame's coach. I mean, he's told me that. He told me that in Purple Rain too, that he thought he was going to be Boston College's coach, literally. Mike Tomlin, I don't see any scenario where he's going to say, yeah, I'd rather go coach another team, but they're in a weird spot up there and they love football like we do. If we were, and we might be on Monday morning, we might be, what's up? We're not winning. We didn't even get to the
It's not
championship game.
not the same though. Not
It's not the same as
not
not
the
winning
same.
a playoff game in 10 years. Right.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you're Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown were still on that team the last time they won a playoff game. I mean, it's unheard of. I mean, and look, it's not as though the Ravens have been awesome in the postseason in recent years, obviously, but the Ravens with a healthy Lamar Jackson have been talked about in the championship conversation. Pittsburgh has been third tier, right? Pittsburgh's been that team that is either going in the wrong direction like they were this year, or they're middling and they find a way to win a game or two late in the season just to get in as the number 7 or number 6 seed. I mean, that's been their ceiling in recent years. Even at the end of the Roethlisberger era, when he wasn't Ben Roethlisberger anymore. I think something that was really telling to me was the way Pittsburgh started that game. They win the toss. They received. They did not defer. Like John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin typically defers. So they took the ball. They came out throwing. Russell Wilson threw passes on 3 of the first 4 plays. So they clearly recognized if they were going to have a shot, they needed to be aggressive. 1 first down and a punt. And even that punt, which Steven Sims muffed, and the Ravens end up starting at their own 5-yard line, they drive 95 yards for a touchdown. I mean, how deflating does that have to be to say
You can't
we're going to
stop
take
them when you give them the ball on the 5-yard line, right?
not
Yeah.
just that, but also we took the ball, which from an analytics standpoint, you're deferring is what you want to do, but because you get possession in the second half, it kind of guides your strategy late in the first half. And we've seen this. I mean, the way the Ravens operate their 2-minute offense late in the half, because you say, hey, we want to score, but we don't want to leave any time because then we get the second half kickoff and we get a
Well,
two
you
for
get
one
2
kind of thing.
possessions in a row.
Exactly.
Right?
You can
Yeah.
get back-to-back possessions. So
That's
Pittsburgh,
like a takeaway almost.
but Pittsburgh said, hey, we're going to be aggressive. But to me, it felt like they recognized they needed to be aggressive, and then they realized they're not capable of playing that way. And I get it. They scored a couple touchdowns in the third quarter, and Russell Wilson got the moon ball going a couple times. And obviously, the Ravens had some breakdowns with Brandon Stevens and with Tre'Davious White. But I mean, they're just not good enough. They're not nearly good enough. Whereas now this week, the Ravens are playing a fellow varsity team, right? I mean, this is 2 heavyweights going at it. Whereas both these teams were playing, and I think Denver was playing much better football at the end of the year than Pittsburgh. I'll give them credit. I thought the Broncos had a heck of a year. I think they were trending up, whereas Pittsburgh was clearly trending down. But both the Ravens and the Bills were playing the JV this weekend. Let's call it what it was. No one seriously thought that Pittsburgh was a Super Bowl contender. No one seriously thought that the Broncos, albeit a good year for them, making it, with Bo Nix as a rookie quarterback, no one viewed them as a serious Super Bowl contender out of the AFC. Ravens and Bills are both serious contenders. And again, only one team can win. So, you, you certainly, if you're going to lose, you don't want it to be, heaven forbid, you make all these self-inflicted mistakes or you play your worst game of the season or anything crazy like that. But if you lose and it's just 2 great teams going at it and the other team makes one more play than you did, it's a long off season. It's bitter. It's disappointing. It's going to make the fans angry, but I don't know if you can view that as some colossal indictment against John Harbaugh or Sean McDermott, because only one team can move on. I mean, this is the reality when, in my mind, the 3 best quarterbacks in football all reside in the AFC. That's not they can't all get to the Super Bowl. So, I think there's the pressure for these teams someone to beat Kansas City, but first you got to try to, you're trying to beat each other to get that opportunity. And that's where that's what makes this game so appealing because you have what has been the 2 best quarterbacks in the league this year going at it and understanding that one of them's going to move on, and that's exciting, but also an unsettling proposition for both of these fan bases.
He's Luke Jones. We are WNST. We're getting you ready for the game on Sunday. Get ready for all the football this weekend. We're also going to talk some baseball here, talk about the bullpen, Charlie Morton, all that. We'll do a little baseball around here. Maryland Crab Cake Tour is on a little bit of a hiatus. We had a plan at Lib's Grill last week, and it snowed. We're going to be back at Lib's Grill in Bel Air in February. But before that, we have a cup of soup or bowl. I'll be releasing details later on in the week. That is Super Bowl week. We're giving a little crab soup away. I'm thinking about doing a crab soup tour later on in the summer as well. I was over at Coco's the other day. I will say this. I got a little bit of the final consomme from the burrito ramen at Nacho Mama's. I slurped it down in Canton, and I stained my Derrick Henry jersey. It looks like blood stains. I'm just going to leave that there for now. I don't think I'm going to get it out until after the Super Bowl. But I'm wearing my Derrick Henry gear. Everybody's ready to shuffle off the Buffalo this week. Luke can be found at Baltimore Luke and can be found back and forth going to Owings Mills for all things Ravens this week. We're out on the internet. We're out on social media. We're everywhere you are. We appreciate all the folks watching us out on YouTube, setting a space on your dial at AM 1570 as you drive around. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. We got plenty more left. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.